Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Remember, if you love film, gaming, or television content, please consider clicking that subscribe button because it is finally time to talk about the one and only God of War Ragnarok. So, let's get into it. I feel like I can't talk about everything that I want to discuss without spoiling the game, so just know that this discussion will be full spoilers for both God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok. But seriously, for God of War 2018, if you haven't played that yet, what are you doing? It's like $9 at EB Games right now, and it's free in the PS Plus collection. And honestly, that game is worth 10 times more than what they're charging for it. So definitely go out, buy it, and play it. You will not be disappointed. So before going into Ragnarok, it's best that you know my thoughts and experiences with this series so far, as I'm still new to YouTube and I haven't fully expressed my thoughts on these games yet. I remember before 2018 came out, I decided to play the God of War 3 remaster, and honestly, I was not a fan at all. I was kind of bored of it after about 2 hours, to be honest with you. Now, that wasn't because the crazy set pieces were bad or the story was bad, because they were pretty enjoyable from what I remember. It's just that the whole hack and slash genre is just not one for me. There is only one game in that whole genre that I have enjoyed playing, and that is Devil May Cry 5. I only bought God of War 2018 because the reviews for it were absolutely glowing, and man, I am so glad that I purchased it day one because I am now a diehard fan of God of War. 2018 blew my mind in terms of how quality a video game can be. There's always this narrative in Hollywood, for example, that movies that have massive budgets nowadays aren't what they used to be. They more focus on being a product than a spectacular cutting edge film. God of War 2018 was exactly that in the gaming industry. It is so giant in its scope and uses every penny in its massive budget it has, and it combines with some of the best world building and storytelling I have ever seen to turn Kratos into this three-dimensional character, and creating that bond with his son Atreus is still one of the most captivating things in any game, and I will always stand by that. The minute I finished, I could not wait for a sequel, especially after seeing that Thor will be in the sequel. And no, not this Thor, this Thor. One that is far more accurate to the tales of Norse mythology and adds so much to the world building of God of War. It was one of those games where I just really need to see the initial trailer to know that it's coming out, because what's the point in seeing every single trailer and spoiling the game for myself when I know I'm going to play it? That turned out to be the best decision ever because I didn't have degenerates posting goddamn spoilers in the thumbnails and them being suggested to me because YouTube's algorithm just wants to give me all of the spoilers for God of War. I bought the collector's edition, which is just the best because my hype was just so high. I'll give you some quick unboxing footage just to show you what it has. I don't get collector's editions very often because it's always just such a gamble. If you don't like the game, it just feels like a massive waste of money. But God of War Ragnarok felt like a pretty safe bet, so I decided to go ahead and buy it. Now, this is a really nice and detailed collector's edition. As you can see, it looks like there's a Jotun shrine as the box, and it contains a bunch of cool stuff like these little figurines and the very detailed die. The steelbook is also quite nice, but the piece de resistance is of course Thor's hammer, and it is so cool. I love the detail on it, and it sits really nicely on your shelf. Now, let's get back into the game. The million-dollar question here is, does this game live up to God of War 2018? And the answer to that is, of course it does. God of War Ragnarok, I think, even surpasses 2018 in a lot of ways by successfully building off of everything that had been set up previously. There was an article that said the developers were concerned at first that they had made a bad game. Man, these guys are just so humble because they couldn't have been more wrong. And that is one of the few times where that is a great thing. These developers at Santa Monica are just so easy to support. The footage that creative director Cory Barlog released after the initial reviews of God of War 2018 came out is just so heartwarming. And even today, it's hard not to feel happy for this man that was a huge part of reinventing these games. From the minute that this game starts, you know that the level of quality is already 99.99999% of all games. You are thrust right into it with Freya, who is hungry for revenge after you murdered her son Baldur in God of War 2018. She is chasing you down in this epic sequence that is full of emotion and intensity. The game does not slow up there, however, as you are quickly introduced to both Thor and, to my surprise, Odin. I don't know why I was surprised to see Odin at first, because if this is the final game in the Norse world, like the developers said, and this game is called Ragnarok, then of course he's going to be in this. I think that so much of my attention was drawn to Thor that I just didn't think about Odin all that much. But they are both performed brilliantly by Ryan Hurst as Thor and Richard Schiff as Odin. They capture your attention from the get-go, and one of the first lines from Thor just feels so iconic already.
Seem like a calm and reasonable person. Are you? A calm and reasonable person.
It equals, or at times tops, the Baldur scene in God of War 2018. We then get into our first official boss fight with Thor, and it is just so epic. It feels perfect in a lot of ways. Something I always have to credit both these games for is that it just has the perfect difficulty. I played both on Give Me Balance, which is basically normal difficulty, and it gives you the perfect challenge where you are utilizing the full amount of Kratos' moveset while not dying a billion times and getting frustrated. The boss fight, as I was getting accustomed to the combat, I was kind of struggling a little bit, and I was basically one hit away from dying the whole time. And then I thought I got hit and died. Santa Monica pulled this Hideo Kojima ass move on us where we get this loading screen and then Thor says,
Oh no. I say when we're done.
and you are back in the action. I mean, what a brilliant way to break the fourth wall and push the boundaries of immersion. It is truly the most perfect way to open a game, just the way that it executed that. Now I think it is time to talk about some of the best protagonists in any video game ever, and that is Kratos and Atreus. I was so surprised to see how great they were in 2018, and in this they managed to take it a step further. Kratos, who is played by Christopher Judge, just gives a fantastic performance. That voice will forever be known as the voice of Kratos, and he manages to have a lot of emotional moments in this. The character evolves so much in the most beautiful ways that I cannot wait to go into full detail on its own separate video. I have a lot of PlayStation and God of War related content coming up, so definitely look forward to that. In a way, I would not be mad if this is the end of the God of War series and the end of Kratos' tale, because I'm happy with where it led. To see his son finally move on and become his own person is something that Kratos had trouble dealing with as Atreus finds his own path, and to see that arc come to an end in such a beautiful way just pays so much respect to this brilliant character. Having him be the one to lead everyone into Ragnarok as well is also incredible. I mean, that whole set piece is unlike anything I've ever seen in any video game, and Santa Monica Studios should be proud of their efforts they put into creating these magical moments that will never ever be replicated. I think another thing that Santa Monica does so well is just putting you into Kratos' shoes. He is easy to connect with, and when Kratos feels a certain way, you definitely feel it too. I remember 2018 did that so well too, and I think Ragnarok does it even better. An example of this comes from when someone is threatening Atreus. You want to do everything that you can to protect him and to unleash that inner beast that Kratos has, and it's just all you want to do. The perfect scenario when this happened was the Heimdall boss fight. Heimdall is perhaps the biggest dick imaginable in this game. The whole game he is kind of a bully to Atreus, and everyone, including the player, knows that if Kratos murders Heimdall, the prophecy shows that Ragnarok is inevitable. Knowing this, Heimdall is threatening to murder Atreus and calls him a little runt. Kratos and the player feel like you just have to murder this guy. In a way, Santa Monica just makes you despise these characters in a way that makes it so enjoyable to just whip their ass, and you just quickly see that narcissism go away and turn into desperation. Then we have Atreus, played by perhaps one of my most favorite young actors in Sonny Solchich. He's incredible in the first game, and I absolutely loved him in Jonah Hill's directorial debut mid-90s, which has him in the lead, delivering a fantastic performance. In God of War Ragnarok, he becomes less of a supporting character and more of a co-lead. To see this character develop over these games was just a great thing to see. He even becomes playable, which I see people, even ones that really enjoy the game, complain about this element. I will say at the beginning it does feel a little different, but once you get more abilities and attacks at your disposal, he is really fun to play as, and he feels quite different to playing as Kratos. It feels more like a developed version of playing as Ellie in The Last of Us Part 1. Sure, it's not good as playing as that protagonist, but it is still a very worthwhile addition, I think. His special ability of turning into a bear is also so badass, and it's just another thing that made this so incredible overall. On the flip side, we have the antagonists, Odin and Thor, and to see the way that they are weaved into this was very, very interesting. Thor is obviously mad at Kratos and Atreus for murdering his sons Magni and Modi in the previous game, and is very different to how they play him in the MCU. Thor is a drunk, a lousy father who is more or less a person who does a lot of Odin's dirty work, and to see his progression in this game was quite a nice arc that kind of just sneaks up on you. He still has his daughter alive in Thrud, and he keeps making these mistakes as a father, and he eventually becomes brave enough and sticks up to Odin for the sake of his daughter, because Kratos manages to convince him to be a better person. Sadly, he just gets murdered instantly by Odin, and you kind of feel sad that Thrud won't see the loving and caring Thor as a father as he turned this new leaf. Every scene he is also in is really badass. I love the design of Mjolnir, and it's just so detailed. Odin, for a lot of this, almost feels like a really friendly presence. He's welcoming to Atreus, and he's willing to work with him, and he almost convinces you at times. Kratos, Mimir, and Freya are all bad-mouthing him, and when we see Odin, you cannot really grasp why until the end, where you see that he just really wanted to use Atreus as a tool to unlock this realm that has infinite knowledge inside. You could say that it was a bit of a disappointment that we don't get to see what is behind that tear, but honestly it doesn't bother me all that much, because I loved what choosing not to pursue that represented for the character development with Kratos and Atreus. The final boss fight with Odin is as epic as you could possibly want it to be, and the way he dies was very satisfying as well. Having Sindri, who is perhaps one of the most wronged characters in these two games, is the one to really deal that final blow and murder him in an act of revenge for the very sad death of Brock. And it was just perfect to me. Both those characters add so much to the world building of God of War to me, and as characters, they are the best in terms of merchants in games, but they really got a lot of time to shine here, and I love that. I'll tell you right now that no game that has ever existed reaches the heights in terms of world building that either of these God of War games do. The way it's able to weave Norse mythology into this tale is just downright flawless. I mentioned in my Game of the Year Awards prediction video that this should win art direction, and I had that opinion after about 10 hours of gameplay. Now, after finishing the game, I think that it would be a downright crime if anything but God of War Ragnarok wins. Its art direction is just unlike anything you have ever seen before. It does so many things that just blow my mind, and the way it's able to execute this vision is something that we could only dream of 10 to 15 years ago. It would take so much for any game to top the level that this is at in terms of its world building and art direction. I've never taken so many photos in a game before. Here's some of the best ones that I feel like I had, and really any one of these could have been a wallpaper. If this game had a photo mode, I would have used that until it broke, because every 5 seconds there's just something that you just never want to forget, because these images are just incredible. The landscapes aren't the only thing that add to the world building, however. There are just so many characters that each add their own unique thing to this world. I've already mentioned Brock and Sindri, but we have Ratatoska, the talking squirrel, the world serpent, Angrboda, Fenrir. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Alright, enough about the story and how it perfectly executes its vision. Let's get into the actual gameplay, which improves upon the masterful stuff that the last installment introduced. It does feel quite a lot similar in those elements, but I mean, come on. How much do you really need to change, and how much can you improve upon a genuine masterpiece? The exploration to me is more or less on par with the last installment. There's plenty to do, and I still have a ton of side content to do, which I'm so excited for, because what I've already done gives just so much more context to characters, and it really tells us a lot in terms of lore. Unlike something like Elden Ring, where you really need to read a damn thesis on to understand anything with that game, God of War naturally shows you everything with all the stuff that you can pick up. The dialogue you have with characters and artwork that is just around tells stories of these realms. Also, definitely pick up the poems and read them. There are some really cool references to other PlayStation games, which I always enjoy seeing those kinds of Easter eggs in all of the games in Sony's first-party library. Some similar things could be said about the combat, but I do think it does build a lot off what we had previously. The movesets can be as simple or as complex as you wish, which is just a telltale sign of a beautiful combat system. The Arkham games definitely have that quality to them, and I know both systems are vastly different from each other, but the fact that you can be terrible at this combat system and still feel like a badass is just awesome. I definitely was quite clunky with it at first, because I was very rusty, because I hadn't played 2018 since 2018, and played tiny bits here and there afterwards. As I got used to it again, and you just begin to develop this flow, and when you're not getting hit and throwing these crazy combinations, you just feel like such a badass. To make these mechanics evolve even further, they added the spear, which was a great addition that just throws a nice little thing to master. It was really helpful for boss fights, in my opinion, when you're really just focusing on the one enemy, but when you have multiple, that is when you gotta go to the blades for that crowd control. I feel like the axe will always be my favorite, however, just because it's linked to Faye and Kratos' ties to this world where he tried to find this escape from his old ways. You really need to know that in video games, I absolutely despise puzzles. I mean, I'm not that smart when it comes to video game puzzles, and in many games, I just find them to be really annoying and just tedious to deal with. God of War Ragnarok, however, nails these in my opinion. They were difficult enough for me that I really had to think about a solution, and it would feel satisfying to figure it out, but they weren't too difficult where I was getting frustrated and just having to look it up online just to find that quick answer. On a technical note, like the rest of the game, it's pretty much flawless. I played this on a PS5 on the resolution mode, which honestly, that's because I don't really care too much for 60 frames per second. I know that's kind of a hot take. I know a lot of people prefer that over the resolution mode, but I've played so many games in 30 frames per second, so that slight boost in resolution is just what I tend to go for. I bought a PS5 to absolutely flex the muscles on how great any game can look, And God of War Ragnarok was brilliant in that regard. In my time playing, I did not notice a single dip under that 30 I had, and even when I experimented with the 60 frames per second mode, it felt buttery smooth as well. Games with this huge of a scope usually come out as a buggy mess, and God of War Ragnarok just reminds me of when AAA games would actually come out and you could really feel their quality and that they were some of the best products in the whole field of video games. Overall, I truly think that God of War Ragnarok is a flawless masterpiece. There is not a single thing I'm going to complain about. And even when I take away my own personal bias and try to be as objective as possible, I still can't think of a thing to complain about. Games like this just don't come along often, and they should be celebrated. This is 1000% my game of the year, and it's not even close. I know there is a lot of Elden Ring fans out there, but man, Ragnarok is just on a whole new level in my opinion. Do I even need to give this a rating? Of course, this is a 10 out of 10 must-play game. It is freaking incredible, and I just can't wait to go back in and play it some more. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. Tell me in the comments below what you think about God of War Ragnarok. I would love to hear your thoughts. I plan on quite a few video releases coming soon. I can't give out too many promises because I'm so busy right now before I go on my Christmas holidays. However, when I do eventually get on holidays, I will try to get a ton of stuff out. The videos I have planned is firstly a video fully dedicated to Kratos and his evolution from the original God of War games all the way to where he is in God of War Ragnarok. I'm thinking of either doing a tier list or a ranking of some of my favorite PlayStation exclusives, and I really think that's going to be a fun video, as well as a ranking of all of the characters in both God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok. After that, I'll be diving headfirst into some of my film content because we have Pinocchio coming soon on Netflix, as well as one of my most anticipated films of the year, Avatar: The Way of Water. So if any of that content excites you, you should consider hitting the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.